ahead and roll with it and go, welcome to the Shame-Free Zone. We're going to take a dive today into a conversation that might impact your personal life if you have any loved ones who are having memory issues, particularly if they happen to be having issues with dementia. We're going to be talking about that. So my guest today is a longtime friend. Torben Riise and I have known each other since 2008, right? Pretty sure it's been a while.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yes,
it's amazing.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you a little bit about Torben. I have great admiration for him. He's a really good friend of mine. He's got a PhD in biotechnology and an MBA in business economy. So it might not sound like it's a topic that feeds directly into dementia and sex, but this guy's got a big brain, as you'll learn from talking with him today. He's held executive positions in several large international biotech companies for more than 2 decades, actually. And he served as a goodwill ambassador for Denmark between 2010, or no, that's 2000 and 2016. And there's a reason he was a goodwill ambassador to Denmark. He's actually from Denmark. Torben is a freelance writer and author of 7 books. Some of them are fiction, some of them are nonfiction. And he's a frequent speaker on issues like the ethics of new technology, futurism, and social restructuring projects. He's a member of several think tanks dealing with future scenarios. So I think you maybe start to get some idea. He's often forward thinking and thinking out of the box, which is one of the things I just love about him. He has written 100 articles, if you can believe that, about dementia, which recently have been edited and collected into a dementia handbook, which was just published on Amazon. So that's what we're going to be focusing about today. Torben would be really comfortable with a lot of different topics, but today we're going to really take a deep dive, not just into dementia, but specifically, since this is a shame-free zone and I'm a sexologist, I want to hear what he knows about sex and dementia. It's actually can be a very confusing and painful topic for anybody who has a family member who has dementia. So, Torben, I'm so glad you're here with me. Thank you for being in the Shame-Free Zone.
Thank you so much.
What's the name of your book?
The name of the book is simply The Dementia Handbook.
Oh,
and the tagline is "Knowledge is Power."
Yeah.
And the point is to start with the background of the book, my interest in the area. And I'm not a medical doctor, but I've been in the medical industry and biotech industry for so many years.
Right.
I was involved in starting and running a company in Denmark with that shared information in the what we call welfare technology. What do people need to increase their quality of life as they get older and get injured or have diseases, whatever. And one of the areas that we picked was dementia, partly because it's such a widespread phenomenon. And for every one person, there is at least 4 or 5 other people directly impacted by a person getting dementia. So it's a big issue. In the United States, there are more than 6 million people with dementia. So there are 25 million people who are directly impacted. And that grows with millions every year. And that's going to double in the next 20 to about 20 years. So, and the cost of that runs in trillions of dollars. I mean, it's just a huge issue for society, but it never get to that level of information that, well, dementia is terrible. I don't even know anybody with it, but I hear that it's terrible. And so our knowledge about it is sporadic. And what I tried to do for this company was to write on a number of lifestyle subjects. Yeah. Partly on what is it to live with dementia. And because there's a lot of people who have written about that, I took a completely different approach to it. Starting with the information what I came to learn out of all the research was dementia starts in your late 40s, early 50s, but it doesn't show up until 20 years later. So we do not know that we may have dementia coming on.
Right. Because the plaques are actually accumulating in the brain earlier.
Exactly right. That's a brain physiology issue. The plaque and the entanglement of the neurons that grow. It grows very slightly, gradually, but eventually get to a point where it manifests itself as dementia. So my interest was, what could we possibly do that could lower the risk of eventually getting dementia, either by deferring it to much later in life or maybe completely avoid it.
Okay.
The risk is not huge, even though I wouldn't want to say one thing about the risk, because it's a difficult issue to wrap your head around. 1 out of 6 women and 1 out of 10 men over 50 will get dementia. That's a high risk, 1 out of 6.
Wow.
And then knowing that it starts that early and not knowing that you may have it or may be on the way to get it, it becomes increasingly important or critically important to know, what could I do about it if something could be done about it?
Before you share that with us, I want to ask you one question. Do you have any data that helps us understand why it's 1 in 10 men and 1 in 6 women? Obviously, there's a gender difference there. My mind wonders, is it because men have shorter lifespans and women outlive men, so the dementia has a chance to surface? Or is it something else?
Yeah, it is actually something else. The whole area is still new to science. There's a lot of things we do not know. So some of it is guesswork, but one of the, out of Alzheimer's is 70% of dementia. There are a couple of other types of dementia. You may have heard about Lewy bodies dementia, which Robin Williams, the comedian, he died from. He committed suicide because he ruined his life and he couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
That's a type of dementia that that impacts your forehead, the frontal cortex, and changes your personality, and you get it's a very, very debilitating disease.
Wow.
Alzheimer's, of course, is a deeply, if you get into it too, but you basically lose contact with the world eventually, and you die from it. But 70% of all types of dementia, they are Alzheimer's. Women have 3 out of 4 Alzheimer's cases are women.
Wow.
And that puzzles scientists for a long time. Why that much? I mean, it ought to be close to 50-50. So of course, the first thing you look at the gender issue. So it's a female biology. And actually what happens is, after menopause, our hormones go gradually down over years. But when women get to 50 or through the menopause, the estrogen drops off dramatically. And estrogen is responsible for blood flow and oxygenation of the brain. And when that goes down, the female brain does not get what it needs to function as well. So plaque and entanglement builds quicker in the female brain than it does in the male brain.
Wow.
So there's some, and it's something you cannot do anything about. That's just the way it is.
Well,
as long as women will go through menopause, and hopefully they live long after that, then they have actually that additional risk that men do not have.
Okay, but you were getting ready to tell us some things we can do to mitigate our risks.
And a lot of them. So I had a interesting. My primary care physician is a wonderful man who actually specializes in geriatrics. So he was interested in it when I told him that I was writing a book about this. Wow, that's really, so what are you writing about? What are you finding? And one thing that he had never heard was that one of the most critical factors, lifestyle factors for dementia, is hearing loss. The good news is you can do something about it. If you weren't, there's only 14% of people who have hearing loss who get hearing aids.
Let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So if you have hearing loss and you treat the hearing loss, you're less likely to get dementia?
Correct.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's why I wanted to do that book. So actually, what happened, like I said before, there are about 70 million people, 60, 70 million people in the United States who are in that age group, from the 50s and up to the 70s. They haven't gotten any dementia yet, but they may be on the way.
Yeah.
But you need to know what you can do. And so the book is about what are all these factors that they may be small factors, but they all add up. And one of the most important ones is to treat your hearing loss.
Amazing.
And it can't be much simpler than that.
Wow.
So you really, one of the things, like I said to my daughter, but you need to encourage everybody who gets to that, even if they don't think they have a hearing loss. And you probably know with hearing loss, you don't know that yourself.
Right.
You don't know that you don't hear the doorbell because you don't hear the doorbell.
Right.
Somebody else is going to tell you, like, honey, why don't you answer the door?
Right.
So we tend to ignore the issue, but a doctor should tell everybody who gets to the around age 50 or 55, well, you should get a hearing test. Just, it takes.
Yeah, that is a simple fix. And
Yeah.
Now a family member just recently got a hearing. We used to call them hearing aids, but I think now they just call them listening devices.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they have some awesome stuff out there. They really do. I mean, when you think about earbuds and iPods and all the things that people are sticking in their ears, nobody even knows. And you can get great colors. And I was trying to get my family member to get this racing blue color.
And most people who do get hearing aids, they almost all of them say, man, I should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because the quality of your life. And so the question is for scientists is, why is that? Hearing aids, dementia, and of course it is, your brain does not get the stimuli that it has to have to be active. There's just too much of the world around you that goes by you.
Yeah.
And actually vision and hearing aids, vision loss and hearing loss together is a major factor also.
So hearing loss and what?
So that's another one very important. Vision.
You said hearing loss. The two main things were hearing loss and what?
Vision. Eyesight.
Yeah. Oh, vision. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you need to see well and you need to hear well to be connected with the world.
Right. And then that keeps your brain stimulated. So
exactly. And that is a whole lot. Another very important factor that is particularly in that age group we talk about down in the 50s, like I have a son who's 50 actually. Now I'm giving away my age.
No, don't tell me that. He's 50 now? Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
What happened? I'm sorry.
That's another story.
It's kids, they keep getting older.
Exactly. It's just me. I'm still 35, and then it's just everybody else.
Right, exactly, Torben.
I feel that way. But they're at the peak of their career. So getting up to that level and you're working many hours, I think that sleep deprivation is the second most important factor that impacts your hearing. And then of course you're back to that's out of curiosity as scientists, why is that? I mean, why is it only sleeping 5-6 hours a night? Why is that so bad for your brain? I mean, I understand I'm tired, but then I'll lie down and
I know the answer to that. I know the answer to that. Let's see if I get it right, Torben, okay? Mm-hmm. My understanding is that the brain goes through a lot of different organ cleansing in the middle of the night. So it needs to go through its sleep cycle, a full, complete sleep cycle, in order to wash away all of the toxins that have accumulated in the brain over the course of the day.
Yep, you were right on.
Right?
There's 100%.
Okay.
Yep. That is the issue we have, and what happens is during the very deep sleep phase, the brain does not need very much oxygen, almost no oxygen at all. So there is an outflow of brain liquid at that time, and it takes with it all the things that should not be in the brain.
Oh.
And the reason why that's important for sleep phase is exactly what you said. You need to have a full sleep phase. You cannot shortcut it. Say, okay, if I can just, cut my first couple of hours out, I had to go to bed late, but I'll still get the end of my sleep phase. You never get the end of the sleep phase unless you have the 3 first phases first.
Oh, so naps aren't going to cut it.
Exactly. So when you cut it from the back end. That's the sleep you do not get.
Oh.
So that's critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the classic one with almost all our good quality of life is you eat well and you exercise.
Yeah.
And then sex is a very important factor also, since we are on that subject.
Let's go to that subject.
Let's go to that
Why would sex be an important deterrent to developing dementia?
Yeah. Well, we can start there. I thought of finishing there because that's the optimistic part. That's all the positive parts.
Yeah.
So we could start in another area, but you guide me through how you want to deal with it. The way I wrote the book was with some of the other issues that people need to know of. Then I get to the last third of the book. We talk about sex and say, well, that's a difficult subject for most to discuss.
But that's great that you devoted a whole third of the book to it.
Yeah. And the but sex and being older, sex is for young and healthy people. Usually the young and the beautiful, but you don't have to be beautiful to have sex, of course. But it's for the young
stereotype.
Older people don't.
It's certainly not a reality here in the Shame-Free Zone. We embrace people of all genders, ages, races, and sexual orientations, and also abilities. So people who
I think most, it's like children or teenagers or even your adult children, they don't think your parents have sex anymore.
Oh, I did. I could hear my mom.
Okay. So, I think I concluded that, well, you passed that stage and no, they don't do that anymore.
Well, let's just get clear in the Shame-Free Zone that there are lots of different people with lots of different experiences.
Yes.
So yes, there can be a stereotype that older people don't have sex, or that people with different abilities don't have sex.
Right.
Certainly not at all what I teach or embrace, and not the kind of viewers that I have. The viewers that I have got a pretty big container for sex, but we're really interested in consent issues. So, but while we're on that topic, I just, we were talking about diet and exercise being really important to make sure that you don't get dementia. It's also really important to sexual function. And I know you talk about this in your book as well, that if you've got diabetes or you're taking antidepressants or you're perhaps obese, I don't want to do any fat shaming here, but sometimes if you have been diagnosed as obese by your doctor, it can start to create some difficulty with blood flow. Cardiovascular issues also. So I think, when you look at, I think about 60% of the United States is obese at this point, or at least overweight. And that shapes our perception of what's possible when we age. But if you've got a healthy person in their 70s can get a rock hard erection and have fabulous sex, it's just not something we are used to seeing. Would you agree with that?
Right.
Yeah.
I agree completely. Yeah. And it's so we need to bring those issues together, sex and elderly people, and of course, among the elderly people, sex and dementia.
Yeah.
And
by the way, I didn't mean to leave out the people with vaginas, of which I'm one. I talk about rock hard erections. Well, you can also have a rock hard clit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's all about blood flow. And if you've got cardio issues or you're taking medication that somehow or another tamps that down, well, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. And of course, as you know, with all your focus over all those years on sexual issues, the brain is the biggest sex organ. And it is the command center for sex. You cannot have an erection unless your brain tells you so.
Yeah.
So the erotic stimuli do not go to your genitals, it goes to your brain.
Yes and no,
Okay.
because I certainly know about some people who are quadriplegic and still can achieve an erection, even though there's been an interruption between the brain and on the spinal cord. So messages
Sure.
are not
Yeah.
able. So,
Yeah.
but that doesn't apply to everybody, but for some people can. So I
Yeah.
just want to, there's a lot of different ways that people can access their sexuality. And I also know that there's something like if you lose sensation in the genitals because of paraplegia or quadriplegia, that sometimes the body will establish another erotic zone somewhere else. So it may go to the neck or the ears. Yeah.
Yeah, that has to do with the body's plasticity, the neuroplasticity. The brain can actually make new pathways. So, well, if I can't go the way I used to go, I'll find another way to get there.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
the brain has an amazing ability to do that, actually.
Okay.
So, but because the brain plays such a big role in sex, of course, then when you think about dementia, you're kind of like, well, it's not a surprise that it goes downhill. It goes downhill for people slightly, gradually downhill as we get older. So sex may not be as athletic, or it may not, and hormone production is lower. So we may not be as active as in the.
Again, Torben, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as a
Yeah.
sexologist, I need to say that varies from person to person. So I don't want to adhere to some of the stereotypes about sexual desire and sexual frequency and sexual function is going to go down with age, because I always know outliers who don't fit that stereotype.
Oh, that outliers, yeah.
And I'm always wanting to encourage my viewers and my clients
Sure.
to move towards their best, their personal best. So the idea that there's a natural decline is not one I actually adhere to. And personally, it's also not one I've experienced, because I've certainly encountered people in their 30s who are already declining and thought that was normal and natural, and people in their 70s and 80s who were very vibrant.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So it's just it's important to,
yeah.
While we're busting the stereotypes, let's bust that one.
Yeah, well, actually, I phrase it differently in the book, because the main thing in the introduction to that part of the book deals with that people with dementia is such a broad spectrum of conditions that they're not any different from people who do not have dementia in those areas. It's just like they have a reduced function in certain areas, and dementia can be very mild. And I deal with that in the early part of the book, is when do we know that we have dementia? Because we all forget things. The car key is the classic one. You can't, or your glasses. You don't know where your glasses are. You run around in the house and then they actually sit on your head, right? Or you can't find your car keys. And we all forget something at some times that has to do with our attention span or multitasking or whatever, or the brain works slower as we get older. It's when the loss of the sense of, you forgot what's on the calendar, or you're on the way out to the car. And you can find your car keys but you actually don't know why you're going out to the car. Where am I actually going? Well, and why am I? So things that
where's that line? How do you know? Because so Torben, my mom has dementia, and to the point now that she's living in a memory care unit because she needs prompts to take care of herself, just to go to the bathroom and shower. But I had an agonizing period of time where she forgot her purse. She forgot her keys. She, was having trouble remembering somebody's name, and it seemed kind of simple. And then, she left something boiling on the stove, and I thought, okay, that's kind of dangerous, because what if it burnt and there was a fire? And then when we got to the point where the smoke alarm went off and she thought it was an alarm clock and she wasn't even aware that it was a smoke alarm, I go, we can't have her here by herself anymore. Plus the car wreck, right? But where is the line? Okay, you cut out.
And that is a
cut,
gradual.
You cut out for a minute, and I
Yeah.
really need to hear this. Where is the
Okay.
line? How do you know when it's
Well,
dementia?
the line is not very well defined. So because you gradually get into it, we forget some of those things where you put things, or we all forget names. I mean, God, you know this person, but all of a sudden you can't remember the.
We hate it.
And I go up and I play pickleball 3, 4, 5 times a week, and I play with players that I play with for a year and a half, and what is his name? And of course, that's because there are 3 of them that are Mikes and 3 of them that are Georges, and things like that. So, but it's when things are used to be routine, things that you always could do, and all of a sudden you can't even figure this out anymore. Or like I say, if the purpose of a certain function that you're trying to perform, if you lose, why am I doing this? And if you're going to a place where you went all the time down the street to that coffee shop or wherever, and you're there again, and you're actually not quite sure where you are, then you know that the brain is getting confused and cannot process across just the normal thing of forgetting things. Because we all forget things. We forget birthdays and we forget all these other things. So, but when the context of why am I here, it's like then you know you are on the way into that. And
that's
and then one of
the sad thing. I just for a minute I want to pause and just talk about how sad it is, because I know for me it's just been heartbreaking to watch my mother's decline.
It is.
And Alzheimer's in particular, you can help me understand if the other dementias are as well, but they're a terminal illness and the brain is actually shrinking.
Yeah.
So it's not just that the cognitive abilities are disappearing, you're actually watching your loved one die essentially, and you keep losing pieces of them. And so you keep going through this grieving process. Oh, lost that part. Now that's not there anymore. Like one of the things, I cannot reminisce with my mother anymore. I can't ask her about my childhood anymore. That's gone. It's totally gone.
Typically, when you get to that, to connect with people at that level, a lot of it has to do with emotional things. In therapy, and I know that in Denmark they use that a lot, is they use music and dancing. And you can see, I saw a woman deeply in the dark in Alzheimer's. I mean, she did not know she was sitting next to her husband. And it was painful to watch. And then they play some music from her older days, and you see, and the minute the music was on, you saw that face, she kind of lightened up, and she couldn't move much, but she saw herself moving around on the dance floor with her husband, and it was like, it is beautiful when it happens. So when you start losing the factual world around them, you can't really have a conversation very much. Then if you can talk about emotional things or memory things that had that impact on them, you do them a huge favor. And I would like to make one statement about, I spent almost 15 years studying consciousness in various contexts, in Buddhism for one thing, which of course is a big thing, but also in conscientiology, also the science of understanding the consciousness. And my primary care physician, when I talked to him about that I was writing the book, we got into that subject, and he said, I have never known this. And here's the story. You do not, when you have dementia, say deeply into Alzheimer's, your consciousness has not changed. What has changed is your mind's, the brain's ability to process what the consciousness contains. So it sounds a little complicated, but if you think of it as like a slide projector, the slide projector transmits some input up to a screen, and that would be your thoughts. The input is your consciousness. The slide projector doesn't create your thoughts and things like that. It transmits the content and make them become real. And I usually use the example of when you fall and knock your head on something hard and you lose your consciousness. You don't lose your consciousness. You lose the brain's ability for a period of time, ability to process what the consciousness has in it.
Right.
So the important context we all have know of these situations. Well, God, I had to, like my friend in Denmark, we're going to go back to talk about that fidelity issue and consent issue and those things maybe in a few minutes. He was, what was I going to say about that? Oh, there you go.
But just I'm gonna slip in a little joke here that I always tell people.
Yeah.
It's not that you're losing your memory; it's that your hard drive needs to be defragged. It's you think about it like your computer has too much information on it. My computer, the more information I put on it, the slower it operates.
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, so the point I was going to make is that we all have this fear, or some people have this fear of, I've got to go see grandma again. I mean, she doesn't even know I was here, or your own parents. They have no clue that you were there yesterday, or they don't even know that you were not there a month ago, and that all that time has gone by. So it's like, all. The point is, they cannot articulate the fact that they do know that you were there. They do feel very good about somebody there is caring about you, and you mean something to somebody else. That self-worth is extremely important. They cannot articulate it. And you can ask them about it. Do you know who I am? And you look at this and little kind of, no, I'm not really sure. Oh, well, I'm your husband through 45 years and things like that. So it's a physical brain that has shrunk. It's not your consciousness. So the person's ability to enjoy your company is always there.
Yeah.
And if we neglect that, we take some value away from them. And I think that I made a big point of that in the beginning of the book also, where we had to remember that, so we don't think we put them away. In Europe, they're beginning to have dementia cities area, and it sounds smart. You put people in the same situation, in a separate area that be taken care of, but it reflects an attitude about, let's get them out of the way. They won't notice anyway. But the point is, they do notice, but they can't articulate that.
Yeah.
And when it comes to sex, that will be some of the same things. I mean, you have the desire, but then if you go there right now, it's like one of the areas the three portions of the things that I talk about in sex. First of all, the changes, the gradual changes that come, but then they go right into some of the challenges. And one of the challenges is dementia tend to change your personality. So you may do things and say things and demand things of your partner that you would never have done before. So, and being that partner, that is hard to satisfy somebody if they have. Sometimes you have almost a total decrease in interest in sex, which can be sad for the partner. Right. You still love your husband. You maybe only be in your 60s or early 70s, whatever. You still love your partner. You still like that closeness that comes with sex, but your partner has no interest. Or it can go the other direction. And of course, you always have that distribution of all situations in the middle, the Gauss curve, as they will call it. But you have some that are insisting on sex all the time. And you actually don't know that you just had sex.
Ooh, that could
be and the partner who's trying to accommodate that, in the beginning, it's not very much. The first signs of it is there, but of course it gradually goes in that direction, and all of a sudden you can't keep up with all that sex, and then you have to reject it. Then the person feels rejected. There's something wrong with me. They don't know they have dementia. All of a sudden, am I not worthy of this anymore, or something wrong between us, or something like that? They're not aware of what it is, what has changed with them. So that stretches a relationship deeply. And many times, I mean, that's where I write in the book. First of all, conversations at a level where you are, the dignity is extremely important. You do it calmly. There's no yelling here. You do it calmly, and you're trying to make the other person understand your position, and the both you try to do that, or they bring somebody like yourself into the picture, somebody who understands some of the mechanisms between people and can sort it out. So some people have a hard time talking about this in the first place.
Well, most people have a hard time talking about sex, period. So then you have to bring in the dementia thing, and it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah.
Obviously,
and of course, then this.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. No, then when you add to it that their sex life can be so different from what it used to be, then if you cannot articulate that, that puts a lot of strain on people. So that's one area I deal with in the book, because it has a lot of complications in your daily life, and it can really impact.
Yes, well, and it is a complicated topic. One of the things I wanted to interject is that there are not many group living situations for people who, and look, we're talking about people who need 24-hour supervision because we don't want them to burn down the house or get into a car wreck. And usually by the time that decision has been made, those sort of things have already happened. And so the family is really concerned that their loved one is going to wind up dead prematurely. And so they're trying to protect them. And so they put them into a group living situation. Most of those group living situations don't actually deal with sex. They may try to pretend the sex isn't happening. But it's fascinating because I found a place, and it's called the Hebrew Home at Riverdale. It's in New York. And they've got this whole policies and procedures concerning sexual expression at the Hebrew Home at Riverdale. And I was fascinated with this. It was revised it actually came out in 1995, and it was revised in 2013. But they approached they want to deal with non-consensual acts with minors, acts between persons if there's any possibility of transmission of an STD, and acts that impact negatively on the resident community as a whole through public display. In other words, somebody, showing their genitals or trying to engage in sex in front of everybody else. But those things are like the things that they want to obviously not have happen in their facility. But they also have a Bill of Rights for the residents. And if I can, I just wanted to read it to you and see what you think about it. Number one, residents have the right to seek out and engage in sexual expression as defined above. In other words, as long as they're not violating those proscriptions. Number two, sexual expression may be between or among residents and may include visitors subject to the conditions expressed in the preamble. And sexual expression between a resident and a visitor, which is arranged by a resident and or a family, is further subject to the stipulation that it is a legal arrangement. I think what they meant there is they didn't want prostitution coming in there. And there is no solicitation of other residents. Again, pretty sure they were talking about prostitution. Number three, residents have the right to access and or obtain for private use materials with legal but sexually explicit content like books, magazines, films, videos. And to the extent possible, residents have the right of access to facilities, most notably private space in support of sexual expression. And then five, residents have the right of access to professional counseling pertaining to sexual expression of self and others. So what do you think about that? How does that land for you?
I think that's awesome. It's one thing I write about, not as extensively as there, but I do refer to the fact that if you are in a residence area, it is quite like, and I call that, I have a section like with changes, to understand the changes that you may face. Probably everybody will face. And then there's some of those changes will be like we just talked about, extreme demands or no demands, and some of them, you just mentioned them here also. It's very likely that you're in that kind of environment. If you actually confuse another person with your partner, you may want to have sex with a nurse who's coming in. And the nurse has to find a way to say no without denigrating the person or make them feel bad and make them feel wrong about. So, but they have to protect themselves. And then it also is in that concept, you need to have in good facilities, and I've mentioned that in the book briefly. In good facilities, you need to have policies like this, including for homosexuality, for instance.
Right. So we don't want to just be, for straight people.
And privacy areas that so you can announce to the facility that you want to have a private hour, and there's a room for that, and there's things that, and good, smart, modern facilities, modern thinking facilities, they will have that and accommodate that.
Really? Is that happening? Because I've never had a conversation about sex with the facility my mother's in.
It is not common. It's what we would like to work towards, because that's a dignity issue for all parties, and it's an important issue for all parties. But it's easier not to deal with it. I mean, it's like, no, let's not talk about sex. I mean, we're here to give them food and make them clean, and then it's that.
Well, it's female ejaculation is something that I educate people about.
Yeah.
And I told you I could hear my mother having sex. She's a screamer, and so am I. And also female ejaculation. This is something I don't know. Was it handed down genetically through my DNA? I don't know, but I do know that my mother would sometimes do that in her sleep. And the caretakers were concerned because they thought she was being incontinent. And I go, no, she's not being incontinent. She's having sexual release. And I had to educate them about that.
Yeah.
It was, for me, in some ways, I felt like, wow, I mean, if they just had some sensitivity to the fact that we're all sexual beings.
Exactly.
From birth until death, we are sexual beings. And actually, we're sexual beings in the womb. I would love for this to be a world where we actually would provide people with orgasms at the moment of death. I mean, what a beautiful thing.
That's a good way to go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just, but we are infantilizing and trying to neuter people as they get older.
Yeah.
And at the same breath, Torben,
that's very true.
It's my mother, and I want to protect her from the men in the facility. And I find myself, as I watch her capacities becoming more and more diminished. And at this point, she really can't find her words much. She can say yes and she can say no, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Well, she could say my name too, and her name. So those are 4 things I know she can say.
Yeah.
How would I even know if she had consent? And I felt very protective of her. Yeah. This is a domestic violence survivor and an incest survivor. I find myself feeling like a parent, like this was my child who's underage, and I don't agree that they have an ability to consent. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. And what do you have to share with us about that?
I think the important thing in when you get to that stage in your life with dementia developing, and it's important that everybody around that person understand the consent issue. There would be people who would, and including your partner. I mean, your life partner could still want to have sex. Do you want to know? Do you actually know whether the dementia person is interested? And if you cannot verbalize a lot of things, you have to find ways to communicate. And there are a couple of criteria for. I should probably find them, because I think that putting it correctly would be important.
Yeah.
I'll just see if it's there.
Well, while you're looking that up, I would just say, I know there was a man in her facility who was showing her a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem that she liked it, but then part of her liked it. So she was sometimes encouraging it and sometimes complaining about it. That was incredibly confusing for me, because I didn't know how to advocate on her behalf.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if she was just, wanting to, she was born in 1939. Maybe she just wanted to play hard to get.
Yeah.
Or was she telling me, get this guy away from me? It became very difficult for me to decipher.
Yeah, so I write that there are three important points in the consent issue that are critical. The one is you have to have the mental capacity to understand the invitation well enough to make the decision yourself. So you have to have enough mental capacity to understand it well enough to say yes or no. So that's one issue. The other thing is you have to be conscious about the information, like the invitation to sex, long enough to be able to make a decision. Because you could easily, the worst thing that can happen is that somebody want to have sex with you and say, well, do you have any objection, or would you have anything against that we have sex right now? And if you don't get a prompt answer, say, oh, okay, that's a yes. I know this. But so the point is, you have to be conscious, the dementia person has to be conscious about the information long enough to be able to make the decision. You need to give them time. So you can't rush the issue. You can't jump in and say, well, you don't want a sex. And you don't hear no, so that must be a yes, right? And
oh, not today.
Not today, no. But no. And we are in a new territory when we are in front of a person like that. I mean, we used to. I've been around. The women I've been around sexually is they could communicate whether they wanted or not to. I was never in doubt.
Yeah.
But you get to that stage in life, you can certainly be in doubt, and if you don't give them time enough to express this, and say, "We've got to do it now, right?"
Right. Okay. So don't rush.
So that's right, exactly. So that's two of it. First of all, you have to have the capacity to understand what the invitation is about, so you can make that decision. You have to be conscious about that invitation long enough so you can make the decision, and then you have to be able to communicate the decision in a way that the other person can understand it, even if that's not verbal. You may find a way to say, well, squeeze my hand if you agree. And then you wait for that to happen or not, or whatever it may be. So it's basic, but it's not until you think about it that actually it's not all that obvious. It makes sense when you hear it, but in the beginning it's not all that, particularly the time factor. I think that was new to me. You ask somebody if they want to have sex, and if they weren't, they will say yes or they will say no. But you may need whatever amount of time, I'm not going to say a lot, but whatever a reasonable amount of time to communicate that you want or not want.
I think that, my heart is just kind of breaking when I envision couples that are going through this. It must be so hard because they want to stay connected in some way, and yet they don't want to do anything that's not consensual. One of the things that I teach couples who don't have dementia is how to practice consent in their marriage, because a lot of the couples that I work with of all ages, including, people in their 20s, feel like once they've said yes, once they've started sex, you can't stop it. You have to keep going. So one of the things I want to add to this conversation about consent is don't just wait a good amount of time for somebody to, confirm their yes. But remember that we're looking for the yes throughout every step of sexual interaction. Not that you have to verbalize it, but that we want to teach ourselves to be intuitive to breath holding, flinching, contracting, pulling away, eyes averting, things to show that somebody is starting to detach or remove themselves from the sexual scenario. And don't just think, oh, well, I got the green light, so I'm going. This is not an intersection, it's a dance. And so at every step of the way, you want to make sure your partner is with you.
Right, exactly. And I think in general, and that's a generality, whatever, but in general, men are not good at that. They're not tuned into the fine signals that women will send them. And it's easy, she always means, the idea is she always means yes, even when she says no. I mean, that's a horrible attitude to have in a relationship like that. I mean,
Well, it is.
one of the things I taught my son. One of the things I taught my son when he grew up and came into that area is that two things I'll support you and back you up and things like that in everything you do in your life. There are two exceptions. You're never gonna drive drunk, and you will never ignore a no from a woman. Never ever. And even if she starts and she likes half part of it, and she likes the petting is wonderful, all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't matter how long time or how far you go in the process. When she says no, you stop. Period.
Yes, and that includes when you have achieved penetration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a difficult one for some of the most progressive, broad-minded men to get. Like, I'm inside her and I should pull out now. Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't be attached to what you're getting. You
Right.
should be engaged with what you're sharing.
Yeah.
And if at any point your partner isn't there with you for whatever reason, then stop.
Exactly.
And don't wait for the no.
Yeah.
But you're right, Torben.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of men that I work with of all ages are not adept in reading body language. And I used to teach live sex workshops where the couples came in, and I encountered this all the time, where the male partner in a heterosexual relationship oftentimes just was clueless. I'd say, can you see what's happening to her breath? Can you see what's happening to her body language? And I had to teach them to watch for this stuff and to tune into it. Now, rather than just get all angry and pissed off that men are so insensitive and selfish, I want to reframe that, because I think the way we've raised our boys is so cruel. It separates them from knowing how they feel. So if you're grown up in a body where you're just supposed to endure pain and put up with stuff, and you don't have a full access to all your emotions, you don't have an intuitive connection to yourself, how in the hell are you supposed to extend that to another person?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a huge task in both the mothers and the fathers in telling I had a couple of discussions with my son also. I said, well, this is actually, it started over pornography, because I saw he had something on his computer, and said, well, I want to talk to you about it. Two things. There's a technical issue there. You are exposing our computer to an unsafe environment just because of the junk. That was an easy way to get into the subject.
Right.
Yeah.
Good job.
Because now we talked about what was on his computer. And so the other thing is that you have to understand that real sex is so different from what you will see in film and pictures. And he had a wonderful answer that gave me an angle into how to discuss that with him. But they look like they like it. I said, well,
oh no,
they are paid for it. They're paid to look like they like it. They're actually
not only that, but okay. So a few years back, I was contacted by a porn star by the name of Jessica Drake. She came up with a whole line of how-to videos. And what she shared with me when I had her on my podcast was that she was horrified that wives and girlfriends were coming up to her saying, hey, I tried that anal sex scene that you did in that video, but it just really hurt. And she was like, no, don't try to do what I'm doing in the movie. She goes, do you have any idea how much time we spent getting ready for that scene? Do you know what was happening off camera? So,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And the good thing about the conversation I had, and he was very cool and calm and factual. And I said, well, this is my perception. You should ask your mom, because she's a woman, and you ask her how she thinks how the women in the porn movies or in the still pictures, how they enjoy that. And he did. He talked to us, and the answer was very clear. No. That's how the real good sex is. I mean,
well, of course, but we're all different, and there's a big container for all of our different likes and dislikes, and some people really like to do those sort of things. But usually they get educated about how to do it right, whether it's BDSM, any kind of kink, anal sex, those sort of things. You
Yeah.
really need to be educated to how those things work
Yeah.
so that everybody's having a good time. And the vast majority of mainstream pornography is definitely catering to something that I think takes us away from female bodily function and away from female sexual pleasure. I just want to call out that there are other types of pornography that are produced by women and lesbians that you know, you're going to get much more of an idea of what the real
and now there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's pornography made by women for women.
And Jessica Drake and Nina Hartley
you can see
a lot of time and energy making sure we get educated about sex through porn.
We had a wonderful, just on that kind of note, we had a wonderful couple in Denmark. They were both sexologists, probably the first two ones in Denmark. They were extremely popular, and they wrote a book, the ABC of love, or ABC of sex, or whatever it's called, and it covered everything. By letter, A, B, C, D, etc.
Right.
And they used a phrase that became standard almost when I grew up was, you need, how did they put it? Something like, we all want to be normal, but you need to know that normal have a great variety. So if it is not normal to want to be tied up to the bedposts with the string, because that might be interesting, or you might try something else that it may not be common, but it's not unnormal. What is unnormal is if you only can get an orgasm that way by being tied up to something or hanging upside down, that's abnormal.
So I would have to reject that, because there's lots of people who may have a particular proclivity that really works for them, and I don't like to shame people around that.
No.
I would say the thing, I'm not even looking for what's normal and abnormal. I'm looking for what is bringing you the greatest joy. Where is your joy? And if, you know, like for instance, I have colleagues who say there's no such thing as sex addiction. Well, I have dealt with lots of sex addiction in my clients, and I have helped them through that. And by definition, I don't look for, are you feeling ashamed and does somebody disapprove of it? Because no matter what you're doing sexually, you probably feel ashamed sometimes and somebody disapproves of it. I'm interested in, I think about a client who lost 3 jobs because he couldn't stop compulsively masturbating to porn at work. That's a huge problem.
Yes, it is.
I'm thinking of people who masturbate compulsively and wish they were dead. I mean, they're so miserable, and they can't engage in life in a way that fulfills them and makes them happy. So I would say if what you're doing it makes you miserable, let's talk, because you don't have to be chained to that. Torben,
I don't know. I don't know how much time we have left, but
we're getting towards the end. But what is it that you'd like to bring forward right now?
Well, I would like to share. I have a section in the book that's called "To Have or Not to Have Sex."
Okay.
That's what Shakespeare would have. That's how he would have said it, right? To be or not to be. That's the question.
Right.
To have or not to have sex. That's a question, and the question is, when you get older or when you have dementia or whatever, is it a good idea to have sex? And then I have 10 points, and I'll rattle them off because there's a lot of science behind each one of them, but they're interesting. Also, it's an interesting area. I would like just to mention the phenomenon of cause and effect. Sometimes we see things are correlated. I mean, I have one that says people who have sex regularly have better lives, physically and mentally. Is that because they have sex regularly, or do they have sex more often because they have physically and mentally they're better? You don't know which one. And you can always say, well, does it matter?
Not really.
Not really, no. So that's one of those things with a lot of those, we call that epistemology issues, and when you talk about people in general and their experiences, you never know really what the cause is.
No, you don't.
And many times it doesn't matter. That's one of the points. So, but there is evidence now, scientific evidence, sex is good for your memory. There is actually a rejuvenation of neurons when you have sex. So there is a renewal of brain matter when you have sex regularly.
Wow.
The
Oh
number,
my God.
yeah, that's a good reason, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
Sex strengthens the immune system, and most of the science on that area has been done with younger people that had sex like 2 or 3 times a week, and they would compare them to other younger people who did not. And those who have sex regularly have a higher level of immunoglobulins in the bloodstream and in your saliva. So it's an easy thing to measure. And immunoglobulins are your signal for your immune system. If you have a lot of that, you have a strong immune system. So we know sex improves your immune system because your body produces more antibodies and immunoglobulins. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Sex results in lower level stress. And that is, we can see in the blood level, adrenaline drops when you have sex and for quite some time afterwards. So your body, and typically we would think as non-scientists would say, well, it feels good to have sex, so it doesn't surprise me. But I mean, it's always interesting for scientists to see, is there something to that, or is it just something we tell one another? And it's always interesting to know adrenaline actually drops significantly when you have sex, and the effect lasts for quite some time. Sex lowers your risk of depression, and that's because it increases the endorphins. And actually, also, that's a good one, isn't it? Yeah, go ahead.
Postscript. Okay. So some people may not like this, but I recently looked at a piece of science that verified that semen in a vagina operated as an antidepressant.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm not saying don't use a condom. I'm just saying the science, if you are fluid bonded, there is some science that says that ejaculate in a vagina actually is an antidepressant for the owner of the vagina.
Yeah. Yep. That's interesting. Yeah. So the other interesting thing is, that's number 6, actually. Sex lowers the risk of heart diseases. And there's a number of functions there, but the simple answer is, of course, the heart is a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you exercise your heart, the better. And you exercise your heart a lot when you have sex.
Yeah.
And I have a chapter in the book where I talk about the exercise and diets and all of it, and so on. And remember, besides all the good things you should eat, remember, you burn 7 calories per minute when you have sex. That is the same as walking 100 meters.
When I read that in your book, I was really astounded. I was, wow, that's a lot of exercise.
If you have a 30-minute, if you have sex for 30 minutes, that's the same as walking 3 miles.
Oh my God.
So on a rainy day, you can't get out and walk. Have sex instead. And
all right, not to brag, but to me it'd be more about like 3 hours, but okay.
Yeah, that's good too, huh? That's why you're looking so healthy.
What can I say?
Yes. And then there's an issue about people who have sex, they live longer. And it probably is a conglomerate of all the other things. We are just basically healthier, and our emotional state is much better also. And so people who have sex regularly, and of course that's important when we talk about people in 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, you can
totally.
That's sexually. And interestingly enough, that's a male issue, but sex protects against prostate cancer. And I think there's some logic to the issue. Of course, it's in the prostate that the seminal fluid is produced. So ejaculation for a man is, well, you're exercising your prostate. So that's
Okay, for all the female ejaculators, we have a prostate too. It's a thing, seriously. 2003, they finally said, yes, we have a prostate. And we could get prostate cancer. And it's really important, if you are a female ejaculator, then you are also helping yourself health-wise.
Yeah. Did you know, by the way, I think you mentioned this something before, I would have said that also, that the clitoris is actually 4 to 5 inches long. It is as big as, if you strip everything away that you could strip away and you don't look at the tip of it, it goes away. And actually, it looks like a butterfly. It's actually.
Oh, yeah. Yes, but it also has a cuff that wraps around the vaginal barrel.
Yeah.
So some people think, oh, you cannot get an orgasm vaginally, but the clitoris is actually wrapped around a portion of your vaginal barrel. So one of the theories is that vaginal orgasms are probably indirectly a clitoral orgasm, because your clitoris is just so huge.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, sex keeps the weight down. It is a way, and because it is an exercise.
Yeah.
And it's good for your muscles. It's good for your brains. It's good for. So I wanted to finish on a note. I mean, dementia is a tough subject, even though we can add some value to it by understanding better and understanding that, like I said in the beginning, the aspect of the consciousness in a patient with dementia is very important to me. I mean, you actually have the same person in there behind the empty shell. You have the same person in there that was always there. And you had to have respect for that person, even they cannot articulate it. But so yeah, there's
on that topic. This topic is a difficult one for me because my mother's suffering with Alzheimer's. I have started trying to intuit what she's trying to say to me because she can't find her words, and but she can say yes or no. So I am getting some sense that just because that's unfortunately one of the first things that goes in Alzheimer's is access to the words.
Yes.
So what you just said for me is a heartbreaking daily reality for me, because I talk to my mother almost every day. Yeah. And I just got her a great phone. All she has to do is pick it up and push my picture.
That's something. I
yes,
didn't know that.
And I have my number programmed as 911 too. So so I'm on call to my mother all the time.
Yeah.
And her caretakers, of course. But I get the feeling there's things she wants to say to me, but she can't find the words, and it's just it breaks my heart, and I'm trying to figure out what she's trying to say. Without putting words in her mouth. And then of course there's the other thing that happens where I could tell there's intelligence trying to come through, and then she cycles through to other behaviors that feel very childlike and distant, and I mean, like just obsessing over the pictures on her new phone. So do you have any idea how, if there's any suffering from the dementia patient of not being able to communicate with their loved ones? Because that is probably the thing that I agonize about the most. Like,
I think
maybe trying to tell me something, but I don't understand it.
Yeah. They suffer. There was a very interesting study. It was actually done in Denmark. There was a very interesting study on how they feel about themselves. And the main conclusion of that was they feel not so bad about dementia itself, knowing that they have it, because it doesn't hurt.
Okay.
Rarely it hurts. The worst thing for a person with dementia is to feel the attitude about them from other people. So, and that's where I think about it in the consciousness context. When they know that they are being appreciated, you may even ask them about their opinion. I have a chapter in my book about how could a workplace accommodate a person who gets dementia, and you give them different work times of the day, different assignments, but they will be part of the work group, so they maintain their worth, and they see themselves as valuable, and they recognize that other people respect them from what they have to offer.
Yeah.
And that sense of we can contribute tremendously with small things, like with the phone with your mom, or little things, and when they try to express something, give them the necessary time, because we live in a rushed area where we try, well, yeah, I don't know, she's never, I never get anything out of it. I mean, that you didn't give enough time. I actually have a section in the book where I talk about what is a good conversation and what is a bad conversation. And a good one is where you give them enough time. You don't correct them when you know that they're saying something contradictory, because it's going to confuse them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they will put things from the past and present in the opposite order, and it doesn't matter. Let them tell them, express themselves the way it comes to them, and you accept it and extract from it as much as you can, and they feel valued.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much with little things, that so much we can do to make them feel better. But because it is, they are sinking into darkness. And
Yeah.
fortunately, it doesn't hurt.
Well, thank God for that. And I definitely have taken to asking her, would you like me to sing to you? And
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
she'll say, go ahead. And then I will sing to her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. There are pieces of music that they liked from the past, but just hearing your voice, because singing and listening to a song is emotional.
yeah.
You may not even get the words, and it doesn't matter. It's you, and they follow it.
Yeah.
The music is a wonderful, wonderful tool. Actually, having a pet is a wonderful tool also. They use that a lot in Denmark. You have a dog and a cat, and
Oh, yeah.
and that sense of if you don't have people around you that you can hug, or you stroke them, and a cat that just sits on your lap and feels wonderful. They need them they even done experiments with a robot.
Oh.
Just the fact that the robot answers them, and you can ask them the most ridiculous thing, and the robot's going to say maybe the most ridiculous answer, but that doesn't matter. So you have little robots with big eyes and a big smile, and that's all. It's interesting. So what it tells me is that dealing with people with particularly the later stage of dementia, when you deal with them at the emotional level, you connect, and that means an awful lot to them.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes my conversations with my mother just boil down to, I love you, mommy.
Yeah.
and she'll go, I know you do.
Yeah.
I just say that.
Yeah.
Just say that. And she called me back the last time I said that. I said, I love you, mommy. And she goes, I know you do. And I said, okay, good night. And she said, good night. And she called me back a half hour later. And she goes, there's something I want to tell you. And she could not get the words out. But I kind of heard something that made me intuit that it might be this. And I go, mommy, are you wanting to tell me that you love me? And she goes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you have a good skill. Well, you have a good listener skill for one thing. I know that from your job, so that helps a person a lot.
Well, and it really helps if we can get away from our expectations.
Yeah.
So I just want to maximize the love while we still are here together on this plane.
Oh yeah.
And I want to make sure that she has everything that she needs and wants.
Right.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Else is there?
There's singing and laughter and love.
Yeah.
And for some people, sex.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. Does she get around? Not around. Does she get out?
She's got total mobility. She's healthy as a horse.
Oh wow.
I told her when she could still remember things and laugh at my stupid jokes. I said, Mom, you're going to live forever, but you won't remember any of it. She thought it was funny. She thought it was very funny at the time. And now she wouldn't understand it, but at the time she thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
Torben, I've so enjoyed reconnecting. You and I've been out of touch
Yeah.
for a while. Well, we're always emailing each other, but we haven't
are.
been face to face like this in a long time.
I get so much out of your email letters, and sometimes it's not my subject, but I always read them from top to bottom and
Oh, thank you.
get a lot out of them.
Well, you have such big interests. I love the fact that you're trying to push the paradigms to new realities that are more uplifting for us.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Yeah. I always like to close my interviews with this final question, which is, what's the thing you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask you?
Oh, wow. I did not expect that question. I'm not even sure. I mean, I think you guided me around to a lot of areas. I mean, there's a lot. If you had 3 hours, I would probably think of something. But
okay. Well, that's okay. I will say though, I'll have on all your lists. All your links are going to be below this interview. But it's nice sometimes to tell people where they can find your book and where they can find you.
Yeah.
And all your forward thinking and futurism.
Will your listener they will not see the book if I hold it up, right, for the camera?
Oh, sure they will.
Will it? Okay.
Yeah, we're live on video, darling.
Oh yeah. All right. All right. So the book is the Dementia Handbook.
Yes.
It's not a totally original title. I wasn't even sure.
No, it's very original. It's just not very creative.
Not very creative, right? And there was one guy who said, well, it's a little dusty, doesn't it? So I may come up with something else. But that's why the tagline about knowledge is power. That is the theme of the book. It's available on Amazon. So you could just go to Amazon and look on the books. The best way to look is actually for my name, because there are either dementia this and a dementia that, and there are handbooks of this and handbook of that, and the list may be long.
Yes.
So either you remember this is a scanning of a brain, so that's the logo.
Oh, okay, right.
Actually, brain with dementia. The other is if you go under my name, which is a little unusual, but if you go under my name, you'll get the list of books that I have out there.
Awesome.
Then you'll recognize this. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's been a really heartful, soulful conversation. I got tears in my eyes at one point.
Okay.
And thank you for letting me bring the personal into this. I always think it's so important to personalize information. Yeah.
Well, you bring the best out in people, so it was wonderful to meet you again.
Yes, I was so glad that we were able to connect here, and just sending you a big virtual hug and so much love.
Same here. I love you.
I love you too, Torben.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.